scientists say. So in other words, aren't dinosaurs disproving the Bible? Well, one of the things we need to remember is the dinosaur word was not coined, it was not phrased until 1841. And the Bible was translated back in 1611 in the King James Version, so there's no reason, there's no way to put the word dinosaur in the Bible, but the dinosaur is described as possibly being in the book of Job, and we'll talk maybe more about that some other time. What does the Bible really say? It says that the dinosaurs, or all the land animals, including dinosaurs, were created on day 6 of creation week. In Genesis 1:25, it says, "And God made the beasts of the earth according to his kind," which would include all the land animals like the dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs, like all animals, were created to eat just plants. In Genesis 1:30, God said, "And also to every beast of the earth I have given every green herb for food." So originally, even that mighty T-Rex was just eating plants. But the plants were maybe a little different back then. We see a lot of extinct plants. The plants might have contained different proteins to supply the needs for these created beings and created animals that God came up with. It's not ridiculous to say that dinosaurs could eat and survive just on herbs and just on plants. But then we want to look at these two myths, these evolutionary myths that are spread. The dinosaurs had many ancestors, that they came from some unknown animal, they evolved, and they evolved into other forms, and eventually when we look at the myth that dinosaurs turned into birds. The biggest problem with any evolution starts with the very beginning of the fossils, where we see the Precambrian-Cambrian boundary, which is called the Cambrian explosion. And this is Charles Darwin's big dilemma. He wondered why it is that suddenly in the lowermost layers of the Cambrian we see every major animal group suddenly shows up. Before that, there's almost no evidence of any multicellular animals whatsoever. Maybe just in the very latest Ediacaran just before that. But suddenly everything just shows up, and that's a big problem for the evolutionists even today. They've written many, many books on this. But from a biblical standpoint, that's not a problem. God created all these animals like he says, and then during the flood, these animals were suddenly buried, and we see the first evidence of the flood in these Cambrian rocks, part of that Sauk sequence. So what we really see is everything just shows up because that's the way God created them, that's the way they were buried in the flood. And we see lots of variety, but we don't see anything changing from one kind to another. And as a quote from an evolutionary textbook that says, "Somewhere, sometime in the Precambrian era, a major milestone occurred in the evolution of life on Earth." That's from the 2011 zoology book. So they don't really know where or when life is supposed to evolve, is that they believe that life did evolve. But complexity and stasis are the rules of a fossil record. Things just appear in a rock layer and then they disappear. They don't change. There's no evidence of changes taking place. They just show up and then they disappear. And the dinosaurs did the same thing. The dinosaurs also did not show evolution. They just show up. You have different dinosaurs in this layer, the next layer above you have different dinosaurs, the next layer above you have different dinosaurs. But do we really see any evidence of evolution like the secularists say? And I challenge you when I say no. The rocks do not show this. Let's look at the sauropods, the long necks, for example. The long-necked dinosaurs had a very unique neck. They had a large body size, four-legged stance, very, very small head, and they all had 10 or more neck bones. They had elongated neck bones, and then they had to have hollow vertebrae to lighten it up. All of these designs were there from the beginning when God created the sauropods. There's no evidence of a half-long neck, half 10 bones, or 9 bones, or 8 bones. We just see suddenly 10 or more neck bones. We see a small head, because if you had a large head, these animals wouldn't be able to support the weight of their head. So all this design was built in by God originally. When we look at the rocks, we see no evidence of any ancestors to the sauropods. We don't see these half-long-necked animals. We don't see animals that have a half-a-long tail, half-a-long neck. We don't see animals with a big head shrinking their head down to a smaller size. We see absolutely nothing. They just show up in the rock layers in mostly the Jurassic and Triassic Cretaceous system rocks. If we look at the ceratopsians, these are the animals with the horns and the frills like Triceratops. We see those just show up in the rock record. There may be hundreds of varieties, and the scientists seem to find a new one almost every year, sometimes twice a year, but they find the same basic four-legged animal with a tail, with a horn or 2 or 3 horns, with a big fancy frill, but we see no ancestors. Look at the rocks for those ceratopsians, look down below the Cretaceous system where most of them are found, and we see no ancestors that look anything like the ceratopsian. They just show up in the rock record. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Tyrannosaurus rex. Are there ancestors to that?